You might know Yamaha from some of their motorcycles or maybe even the pianos that they make. However, not many people know that they were among the first brands to sell e-bikes. Today we're reviewing the Yamaha YDX-Moro 7, an EMTB that is celebrating the brand's 30 years in the e-bike industry. Let's look at what 3 decades of e-bike knowledge adds up to in today's review. Hey guys, Griffin here and welcome into Electric Bike Report. Whether you're in the market or just love keeping up on e-bikes, make sure to subscribe. We've always got more bikes in the review queue and other content in the works, so hit the notification bell to keep up with the latest things that are coming out around the corner. So the YDX-Moro 7 is a really unique e-bike in a lot of different ways. The bones of this bike are just terrific, and with an MSRP of $63.99, you're getting pretty good spec on this bike. Our bike actually costs another $100 as it is the 30th anniversary limited edition paint job. It's looking quasi-futuristic to me with all that chrome. But now, there aren't a ton of brands that can say they've been making their own frames, batteries, and motors on an EMTB like Yamaha can. Not only that, but what they've built just has unique properties in general. I'll walk you through all of the specs, but first, let me just highlight some of my biggest takeaways from my time on the Moro. The frame design is one of a kind. It's a patented design that was borrowed from some of their motorcycle engineering. Yamaha uses a split top and bottom tube design. On top, they have the shock anchored within the 2 tubes, and even the battery rests between the 2 parts of the tubing on the down tube. It looked a bit peculiar at first, but Yamaha designed it this way to maintain a proper balance, as battery placement too high or too low can affect how it feels riding through things like a berm. A lot of focus went into this design to balance the bike's center of mass, and I gotta say, it did feel pretty good. It doesn't fight you into turns, nor does it feel like it'll tip over with a high weight placement. The balance was just really well struck. The overall ride quality is pretty nice. It's a 150/160 RockShox suspension setup. The Lyric fork with its 35mm stanchions felt nice after we got it tuned just right, and the Super Deluxe Select Plus shock was also pretty solid with Yamaha's linkage system. Now, the cushion support was overall pretty good, but with a pretty steep head tube angle and 27.5-inch tires, this was a bit more of an all-mountain than true XC or Enduro type of ride. So it does a bit of everything well, but you'll want to proceed a bit slower and purposefully if you have lots of technical downhill, like most of what we have on our local trails. Last but not least, the warranty stood out to me, and that's not something I usually focus on too much in a review. You see, a lot of bikes have generous guarantees when it comes to the frame, but since they are partnering with other brands on the electrical systems, those are usually in the range of 1 to 2 years of coverage. But Yamaha makes the big 3 things you're really buying when you get an EMTB: the frame, motor, and battery, so they guarantee all of those for 5 years. Now, since the parent company itself is over 100 years old, that's just terrific peace of mind to have when making a significant purchase like this one. Yamaha states on their website that they have 3 pillars of a pure ride concept from the motor's perspective. It should be compact and lightweight, have a high output, and it needs to have a quick response. Let's look at how it does in those 3 regards. The motor itself only weighs 6.06 pounds, so along with its 250 watt nominal and 500 max watts, it gives you an 82.5 watts per pound power to weight ratio. It's not class leading, but it's still very solid in the push-pull game of wanting more power without having to add more weight. Yamaha designed it to output between 80 and 400% assistance, but that is not overpowering on the trail as it is actually pretty natural feeling, so it's definitely got great output. In addition to torque, cadence, and speed sensors, it even has a gyroscopic angle sensor, so it'll know when you're on a hill and that you'll be needing a little bit more juice. I think the biggest achievement of that 3-pillar approach was the quick response. For one thing, it has really good power at a lower cadence. So if you're at all guilty of bad shifting habits and not shifting down before going into a hill, or maybe you just lost momentum coming out of a corner that's immediately followed by a hill, this motor will be very forgiving as even a slower pedal cadence will quickly achieve a maximum motor effort without overboosting you. Now this differs from a lot of other motors where it seems like power levels build up and peak in the high cadence that you typically achieve midway or towards the top of a hill. So it's kind of a cool calling card that this motor has. Now the trade-off of all this is that it's a little slower on sustained climbs. You'll see this illustrated in our hill test to come, but I don't want to lose the overall focus of how we actually like how this motor does things a little differently and it rides great. Another part of that quick response focus does result in a little quirk. We've noticed when track standing, you can sense a vibration in the pedals like the motor is excited to jump to life. It also caught me by surprise a time or two when stopping to check my phone, as even a little pressure on the pedals and it was ready to lurch to life. It's not dangerous in any way, it's just something you have to adapt to. But once you get things going, the natural feel of the motor is what shines. The motor has 5 different power levels. Each felt fairly distinct from the others, so all 5 felt like they had a purpose. The ride also includes an adaptive mode that's meant to access whichever PAS level you need and move through them while you're riding. Now personally, I didn't use the adaptive mode much as I felt it was quick to go conservatively back to lower eco modes, but it might sync up better for how you ride, or you could just operate it all manually as I did. Now in terms of noise, it does have some noise and whine to it, but overall it's not too bad, especially given the amount of assistance it's producing. As for any noise or feedback from how it sits in the frame, I didn't detect much, if any really, rattle or clunk as some mid-drives can have. On the battery side of things, the YDX-Moro 7 only comes with a 500 watt-hour battery option. I do wish it had other sizes to choose from, as many EMTBs are giving you more options these days, but Yamaha's charger will charge the bike back up to 80% in only an hour, which is much better than most. You can also pick up a spare battery too if you'd rather have the peace of mind that comes with having a second battery ready to go when needed. Yamaha uses the Interface X control unit for its display. It's a larger unit just offset to the stem, and color-coded lights help signal which of the 5 PAS levels or the auto assist mode that you're using. I'll be honest, I found the display to be unnecessarily chunky. I've seen a lot of EMTBs that use some form of LED lights to a similar effect, and that's either integrated into the top tube or by using a more discrete control unit. Granted, the unique design of the top tube probably doesn't allow for that here, with what it would take to fit in and run power to it, but still, I've seen other displays half the size of this one that showcase the same settings. Now given its size, I'd actually just rather it had a screen with a bit more data to it. At the end of the day, it's not a huge deal. Most EMTBs keep a super minimal approach in this department, and there's nothing stopping you from just powering the bike on and enjoying your ride. But I do think Yamaha could definitely modernize their approach here. The unit also includes Bluetooth, so you can connect it to various compatible bicycle computers, which will help you capture and track enhanced metrics. Sadly, Yamaha does not use a dedicated app. Now Giant, one of the brands that actually uses the PW-X3 motor, they do have a companion app for motor tuning and some enhanced metrics, so it'd be nice to see Yamaha develop one that you could use if you're riding a Yamaha bike. Our EMTB range test was developed on a mix of green, blue, and black trails with the intent of really putting EMTBs through a little bit of everything. We've got some notoriously rocky and technical terrain here in southern Utah, so the motor gets ample opportunity to showcase what it's got as we ride up some seriously chunky paths. Since each bike has different output levels and each rider will have different power preferences, we test each EMTB at the bike's max assist setting to establish a floor value and find a consistent point of comparison to see how much mileage a bike can give you when the power is giving it its all. So in our range test, the YDX-Moro was able to go 19.24 miles while climbing 2,131 feet. It rode for 1 hour and 46 minutes while maintaining an average speed of 10.89 miles per hour. Overall, that's solid range from the battery and it lined up with my expectations. Now it's undeniably a little bit on the short side by a few miles compared to other bikes that we have tested, but the 500 watt-hour battery is also the smallest battery to be put on this course, so I guess that kind of checks out. Now, this test course was just established this year and the sample size is still pretty small, so take that all with a grain of salt. We've also got a way of looking at the efficiency of the motor and battery combo. When running the numbers, it had a middle of the pack efficiency score, so it's doing all right for the setup that it has. So really, at the end of the day, you'll just have to decide for yourself what your needs are out of an EMTB like this one. If you want a massive trekking experience, maybe a second battery is needed. If you do more cross-country and have more modest power demands, you can get more out of this battery if you need. But if you're planning on doing some more power-demanding loops, it can handle a solid day's work with nearly 2 hours of ride time. With each EMTB we receive for review, they get put on 2 different standardized hill tests. First up is Hellhole. This is the test hill where each and every e-bike we've tested, regardless of styling, gets put to a paved 1/3 of a mile climb on an average 12% grade. We take EMTBs to their more natural setting for our second hill test at our Water Tower hill climb. It is just under a mile long and it has a 5.5% grade. Now our tester, Justin, does both of these tests so we can maintain consistency in the results. So I'll pass it to him so you can see how the bike did.
All right, we are on the Yamaha, the Moro 7, and this is one I've been more excited to test. And I'm really curious to see how this does versus some of the other EMTB motors that we've tested recently. So far it feels pretty good, and I would say it's pretty darn quiet too. So I'm trying to keep the same input, you know, steadily across these mid drives. It's definitely more powerful than a lot of like the city mid drive bikes. Felt really good on the trail yesterday when I took it out too. So see how it does. I'll let you listen to the motor here. So yeah, for the motor, I would say like it has that, it's a little higher on the pitch, especially when I'm pedaling faster like here, but it's quiet. So that's kind of the combo that I'd give it. And I feel like I'm doing pretty good here. And I can say on the trail, it felt very powerful. And so we're gonna have to see how this compares against the other EMTBs. But I think overall it feels really nice. All right, we are out here on the Yamaha Special Edition doing the tower water climb on a very smoky day. The fire smoke from California has definitely hit. So sorry for the smokiness, but we're gonna test the bike. So this is the Yamaha YDX-3 motor, and you know, we just actually did a Giant similar motor, just tuned a little bit differently by Giant. So I'm curious to see how it does. So I'm gonna ride up for a little bit here, get a feel for it, then I'll come back with my thoughts. All right, so kind of what I was expecting on the motor. The initial engagement when you start, you can be in kind of a higher gear, not a super high cadence, and it will still give you like assistance. I'd say a little better than other motors. And so I really do like that when you're starting out. If you're not, you know, you don't have to worry about being in such a high cadence. Now, as I've been climbing, the motor is very quiet. There's no way I'm guessing you're not hearing anything, especially with the wind, but it's just very quiet motor. The power distribution feels very natural. I'm not feeling much overrun at all. And so I think that lends itself again to that more natural control feeling. And you know, the motor has 85 newton meters of torque, 250 watt nominal, 500 watt peak wattage. So it's definitely powerful, but feels slightly less than some of the other motors. But to really answer that, we'll have to check the tape, see how it does. I think the biggest takeaway for me really is the natural engagement, the natural feel of the motor. It's just, it really is fun, natural feeling. And so we'll go check out the results and see how it does power-wise.
So over at Hellhole, the Moro posted a time around our current average of all the e-bikes we've tested there. It climbed the hill in 1 minute and 32 seconds with an 11.8 mile per hour average. Now the current average time for bikes stands at 1 minute and 29 seconds. Now on the water tower climb, it reached the top in 4 minutes and 15 seconds for an average pace of 12.2 miles per hour. That's a bit slower than other bikes, as we're currently averaging 3 minutes and 47 seconds at this location. The data is kind of interesting. On the shorter climb, it beats out most other EMTBs, but when you put it on a longer climb, it actually comes in as one of the slower climbs. To use a track analogy, it's doing great in the 400 meter dash, but it's not quite as suited to winning the 1500 meters. Now, does that mean it's bad? Like, no, not at all. We actually love this motor and don't think it gets talked about enough in the endless debates over EMTB motor performance. At the end of the day, we focus most on the feel and capability. In terms of its feel, it's able to thread the needle of being powerful, but not feeling unnatural. It's pretty capable and climbed every hill we could find just great. So it'll take the most intimidating aspect of hill climbing head on and allow you to just focus more on having fun while enjoying a ride out on the trails.
Hey guys, welcome back. We were on a new bike today for our ride quality video. We're on the Yamaha YDX-Moro. Now, some of you may be thinking, the Yamaha, where's the gas tank? And this is the electric mountain bike that Yamaha has produced. Kind of interesting, they're not really a brand that's known for what we do in this space. But they're kind of going at the market in a couple of different ways. The first thing is the motor. They have produced their own motor that they put in their own bikes, obviously, like this one, but they also offer it as a third-party motor for other bike brands. Recently, we reviewed a bike from Giant that had this motor in it, and I really liked it. Well, just the bike in general I really liked, but the motor has some very unique characteristics and qualities that I really liked. So I'd like to get into that more so on this ride quality, the characteristics of the motor, than the actual bike. However, I cannot help but mention that as I was looking on Yamaha's website, the bike that we're riding is the limited 30-year anniversary edition. And you think, okay, yeah, limited edition. We're looking 5 figures on the sale price. So as I looked, I was blown away, you guys. His bike is on sale for like $2,500. Okay, and it comes well spec'd. It's not like they stuck on cheap stuff to get the price down or their cost down on this bike. We're talking higher end RockShox suspension, Magura brakes, Shimano XT drivetrain. Like, it's good stuff. One of the complaints from previous iterations of this bike was that it had a very short dropper post, which they have changed. So the model that I'm riding, I cannot help but think, man, for the price, this might be the best bike on the market at the current sale price. Okay, the motor. This motor seems to have more power than it says on paper in lower cadences, yet maybe a little less power than other competitors' motors in higher cadences. I think that's probably only something that a rider would notice if they're riding this bike back to back with other bikes. It's got 85 newton meters of torque, and it really shows or really shines in like the 50 to 70 cadence range with that torque. So if you're in the wrong gear and all of a sudden you come up on a hill, that's where this motor is going to do well. One of my favorite things about this motor is the sound, or lack thereof, I should say. One of the things I love doing is obviously riding downhill, and motor noises drive me nuts. You can get used to them. And when I'm on a bike that kind of rattles a little bit, you get used to it, it's okay. But on this, the Yamaha motor, when you're going downhill, there is no rattle, there's no clunk. It's just dead silent. And all you hear is your hub and the tires on the dirt. I love that. Now, the other part of the noise that comes from motor is when you're climbing or pedaling. And this Yamaha motor is definitely more quiet than the Bosch CX motor. It's definitely more quiet than the EPA, the Shimano motors. And I think I mentioned this in the review of on the Rain. It kind of reminds me of the sound from the Fazua motor. That it's gotten popular on a lot of different bike brands in their mid-power, low-weight e-mountain bikes. Just as like a frame of reference. So as far as motor quality and how the motor rides, how it climbs, the performance, it is one of my favorites. Now let's talk a little bit about the riding characteristics of this bike in relation to the geometry and wheel sizing. This particular bike, well, all of the Yamaha EMTBs are full 27.5 wheel front and rear. They have 150 mil rear travel with 160 mil fork. I don't know exactly what the reach numbers are. I'm riding a medium bike today, and it feels appropriately sized on the reach numbers for a size medium. Now, what they've done with the geometry on this bike is they have a head angle that's fairly steep. I believe it's like 66.3 degrees, and that is paired with almost a 470 mil chainstay. So the head angle, being what it is, really lends itself to a very maneuverable and nimble style of riding. So when you're hitting corners, tight switchbacks, things like that, that steep head angle is great. And even though you have some longer chainstays, probably one of the longest chainstays I've ridden to date on a bike, it doesn't feel cumbersome or lethargic on the trail. It rides really lively. And that longer chainstay also is going to help stabilize the bike on longer descents, which I really think they did a good job with kind of trying to balance out the bike in that way. Where I think this bike doesn't do quite as well as other bikes is when you get into really chunky and rocky descending. That steep head angle paired with a 27.5 inch front wheel doesn't make it quite as easy to get over things in the trail. It makes it just a little bit, you just gotta slow down. Whereas on, you know, a mixed wheel bike with a 29 inch front wheel or a full 29er bike, even with a steeper head angle, you'd still be able to just bomb down some stuff. I can't help but also think that at this price, this bike, for me, if I were to buy it, would be the perfect DIY mixed wheel bike. What that would do is slacken the head tube angle out to about probably 65, maybe 64.5, and give you a little more stability, and this thing would be a bomber. And now that's for, you know, a lot of the type of riding I like to do, and the type of trails that I usually ride. For a lot of people, if you're riding greens and blues and even flowier blacks, this full 27.5 setup is gonna be perfect. But at any rate, the bones of the bike kind of give you some options, especially at the price. Such a great value. And again, the e-bike kind of starts at the motor. And for this bike, I mean, Yamaha has been doing this for a long time. As this anniversary edition shows, 30 years. So the motor on this bike really shines. Now the controls, I don't think they have quite as good or as user-friendly of an app to customize the motor tune, but at the same time, I don't think you need that because this bike has 5 different motor settings from the controller. So you're bound to be able to find something that works for you for the type of ride or riding that you generally do, as well as it's going to give you the chance to, if you want to really boost up your cardio ride on this bike, you can really fine-tune the motor assistance to give you the type of workout you want to get for that particular ride. In conclusion, I would say the biggest takeaway from the Yamaha motor is that it gives you a much higher torque in lower cadences than other motors with those same lower cadences.
Bryce gave you a lot of thoughts on that ride along, so I'll just summarize a few things and wrap up. The bike has a pretty good feel to it. It's well balanced and feels livelier than most on the trails. Of the aluminum bikes that we've tested out recently, this one was a little bit lighter than most by 5 or 8 pounds, and I think that it felt pretty good when navigating the trails. The suspension system was pretty nice. It was a really comfortable ride after all. It just feels like you're never going wrong on RockShox setups, and we're always pretty big fans of the Lyric in particular. You may have heard Bryce mention that the bike has good bones. That's just more confirmation that the bike handles well and has a lot of desirable parts. The Lyric and Magura brakes were particularly nice to me, but we'd maybe look to alter a handful of things to suit our trails better. For us, we have a lot of trails locally where an enduro bike is the ideal tool for the job. So slapping on a 29-inch tire, which in turn slackens out that head tube a bit, would be a little bit more beneficial to us. It would further take advantage of a pretty good chainstay length on this bike to just help us go a bit more confidently downhill. We were still going downhill on this, but just a bit more cautiously. Now, if you're doing a bit more XC riding or sticking largely to greens and blues, there's not a whole lot that you really need to change up. This thing will ride great if you've got a bit more all-mountain purposes. Overall, I thought the YDX-Moro 7 was a pretty good ride. The highlight for me was just a well-balanced feel to it. The bike felt good on switchbacks, and the steeper head tube angle made climbing really nice. The motor worked well with the gearing to climb just about anything, and there was enough traction in the tires that I found myself feeling controlled through dirt and rock. It was pretty comfortable. The suspension seemed funny looking to me at first with how the linkage is set up with the frame, but I can't say I had any issues with it once I got the pedals turning. It just made for a really nice ride. The more experience I get with this motor, the more I like it. I think it'll appeal to people who are newer in e-bikes since it has such good power when starting off the line at that low cadence. I'd welcome a few changes to this bike though, namely a new display box. If Yamaha chooses to develop an app of its own, I'd also be pretty happy with that too. But overall, I think this is a really good jack of all trades kind of ride that does things a little differently, but it does them well. That's gonna do it for this review. Make sure to leave us any questions in the comment section on what you want to know about the Yamaha YDX-Moro 7. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe. I'm Griffin with Electric Bike Report, and I'll see you on the next ride.